Hi, everyone. I'm the Reverend Chad Slater here at Christ Episcopal Church in Bluefield, West Virginia. This is the second of our four-part series looking at overviews of the Holy Gospels. It's my hope that these overviews will allow you to read these Gospels with new eyes as we look at who wrote them, what they were written for, and a little bit about why they're written the way they are. Today, we're going to look at the Gospel according to Luke, and we'll first start by talking about who the author actually is. The author of Luke is the same author who wrote the book of Acts. And in Acts, the author sometimes refers to himself in the first person as one of the Apostle Paul's traveling companions. By process of elimination, we are left with only a handful of possibilities then for the author. Epaphroditus, Titus, or Luke. Luke, the beloved physician. Tradition ascribes the work to Luke, and most scholars can find no reason to doubt this. His vast vocabulary and frequent citations of other works means that he's obviously very well educated and very well read. Paul notes in Colossians that Luke is a Gentile, which would make him the only such author of any work of the New Testament. No one is certain exactly when the Gospel of Luke was written. It does not appear to have been written for a certain time or place, but rather it seems to have been created for widespread publication. It was almost certainly written a generation after Jesus' first disciples, since the author admits that he is reporting matters that were, quote, handed on by others. It appears that the author had a copy of the Gospel of Mark, as it is quoted from directly numerous times. Who was it written for? The opening sentences to Luke and to Acts state that it is a dedication to Theophilus. Theophilus was probably a wealthy Christian who commissioned the work to be written. Writing, copying, and distributing such a work would have entailed enormous sums of money at the time. Theophilus is a Greek name meaning, quote, friend of God. This was a common name, and in Luke, the name is prefaced with the designation most excellent, a customary title given to rulers, similar to Your Honor. This may mean that he was a government official, and as such would have had the resources to finance such a composition. But what's in the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke? About one half of Luke's Gospel is composed of material that is found nowhere else. It uses 350 verses from the Gospel of Mark, but nothing from Mark chapter 6, verse 45 to chapter 8, verse 20, sometimes in biblical study parlance called the Great Omission. He also does not use anything from Mark chapter 9, verse 41 through chapter 10, verse 12, the appropriately titled then Little Omission. Some have suggested that Luke was working, actually, with an incomplete manuscript of Mark. Luke comes the closest of the gospel writers to penning a formal biography of Jesus. His is a formal history, with several references to events and persons prominent in Syria and Rome at the time. Specific cultural references are not included. Luke places greater emphasis on Jesus the teacher. He records 23 parables of Jesus, 17 of which are nowhere else in the Bible. 5 miracle stories are reported by Luke that are not recorded in any other gospel. Luke provides the only account of the ascension, or 2 accounts, as it's repeated in Acts chapter 1, verse 6 through 11. The Gospel of Luke contains a great deal of poetry as well. The Ave Maria, the Magnificat, the Benedictus, and the Gloria in Excelsis, and the Nunc Dimittis are all found in the first 2 chapters of the Gospel of Luke. It is possible that these were very early Christian hymns, and the author wanted to tie them into the history he was reporting. Major themes in the work include worship and prayer. Luke's Gospel opens and closes with people worshiping God in the temple. There are 20 references to people worshiping or giving thanks to God. Jesus prays more in Luke than in any other gospel. Only in Luke do the disciples ask Jesus to teach them to pray. Another major thing after my own heart is food. Luke mentions 19 meals, 13 of which are not recorded in any of the other Gospels. Jesus is often present at meals, gets criticized for eating too much, and for eating with the wrong people. Banquets are a common theme for parables. These events are depicted as occasions for healing, hospitality, fellowship, forgiveness, prophetic teaching, and reconciliation. He also focuses on the ministry of the excluded. There is special attention given to outcasts, victims of oppression, and the disadvantaged. Prejudicial attitude towards Samaritans is challenged in multiple verses of the gospel. Women play a prominent role in the story as well. The author's prevailing concern appears to be toward the poor. Jesus proclaims his ministry is to, quote, to bring good news to the poor, and to, quote, let the oppressed go free. Poverty is considered a consequence of injustice and is accompanied by hostility toward the rich. This is frequently reaffirmed in the parables that Luke cites. The final major theme that's in the Gospel of Luke is the present availability for salvation. Luke emphasizes salvation as a reality to be experienced here and now. Luke portrays salvation as liberation on earth so that we may all be free to experience life as God intended. When Jesus heals or casts out demons, they are always described as people being saved. So why does the author tell the story this way? It appears that the work was done in order to have a, quote, official history of not only the life and work of Jesus, but of the church. Faithful Christians may have begun to realize that the return of Jesus may not be as imminent as Paul, Peter, and others had originally seemed to think. This could account for all the teachings towards liberating the disadvantaged. We know that early Christian gatherings were centered around a communal meal. The frequent references to food, as well as the incorporation of poetic hymns, may have been an attempt to link the story with what can or should happen at church. My brothers and sisters, as you reflect upon the Gospel of Luke and read it, perhaps with new eyes over the coming days, weeks, or months ahead, I hope that you'll remember this. Next week, we'll actually take a look at the Gospel of Matthew and see a little more and learn a little more about that author. I pray you be safe and well in the coming week, and I pray nothing but the best blessings upon each and every one of you. Peace be with you. Thank you.